when we decided to add this discussion to the agenda for today, we, and I'm sure many of you, were hoping that the focus of our discussion would be very different. We thought we would be here, or we hoped we would be here, thinking through positive, proactive ways in which we might engage with renewed vigour in our shared European project, and particularly in the latter stages of Horizon 2020 and what lay beyond. Of course, we're in a very different situation now. We do, of course, have still important debates to have about the terms and process by which we continue to engage in all of those things. But there are many big debates in front of us.
There are going to be enormous challenges for social science and the academy in the months and years ahead. Funding is one thing we've talked about, but as important are the substantial relationships, the ability to work with others to form common research themes. There are questions about EU students, and again, that's not just a fees question, it is a diversity question. There are questions about all of this in the context of the effect on the economy more generally, what's happened to government spend on research, and so on.
I don't think we can really identify a more important time in recent history when social sciences needs to be directed towards trying to understand some of the really fundamental changes which are coming about in UK society. And I think we're seeing those reflected across Europe as well. Perhaps if we look towards the US, we can even see signs that this is more than a UK-Europe question. It might be a Western liberal democracy question, to example. So I think we really have got an unfortunately critical role to play in trying to understand really what's happening. We're in a coincidental period where there's significant changes happening in UK research policy, the structure of the research councils. So we're now trying to come to terms with a quite significant double change in the way that social research is being funded. But beyond just the funding question, I think we have to think quite seriously about how this is going to influence the relationships, the research networks which have built up over a period of time. There's no real reason why scholars can't continue to collaborate across borders. These aren't intellectual boundaries, these are just geopolitical boundaries. There's no reason why people can't continue to collaborate. But we don't yet fully understand how the relationships will be affected. I think we have to look a little bit towards the experience that the Swiss went through after their referendum in 2014. They very quickly became forgotten members of research consortia and weren't invited to participate. So one of my concerns is that we have to be quite clear what the UK status is well before negotiations are concluded and well before the UK actually exits the EU, if that's the final outcome.
One of the things that we saw with Switzerland in 2014 is that as a result of their vote and their changed relationship with the framework program and that being put into question, anecdotally, we've heard a lot of people moved away from seeking Swiss partners, just for practical reasons, because if they're unsure about their future status and they're putting a grant proposal in with them, then that can make their own situation less certain for the future. So I think we're going to have to work very hard with our partners and other stakeholders in the European Union to try and do the best we can to mend fences and keep those relationships strong.
UK social science might access the European research area in the future in terms of funding, leadership, and participation, and that it's going to depend largely on the deal that's struck between the EU and the UK, not just generally, but specifically in terms of the common market and freedom of movement. And there's a couple of reasons for this. There are basically three ways, as most of you know, that you can gain access to the European research area and the framework programs. That's either as an EU member country, as an associated country, a fully associated country, or as a non-associated third-party country. How can the UK become an associated country if that's what they decide that we want to do? Under the current provisions, there are 3 ways to do that. Either you're in the process of EU accession, which obviously doesn't apply. 2, you're either a formerly associated member of a previous framework program, which for a host of legal and practical reasons is probably not going to apply. Or 3, you are a member of the European Free Trade Association.
The access to European funding without migration, without freedom of movement, is pretty thin, and we know it. I mean, the Swiss case demonstrated it so clearly that if you're not prepared to follow human rights law, to apply the laws of the European Union, then you won't get the money and you won't have a say in the way these programs are organized.
This moment is the point where we need the social sciences as a voice of reason and a voice that is able to apply the methods to listen to what people want. I have not seen that voice carefully displayed, shall we say, in the campaign leading up to the referendum, where we were bombarded with numbers and facts. What we now need is we need to actually explain to what a referendum means as a consultative advisory instrument to tell us where the people stand. If this were not to lead into Brexit, then the campaign would have done a great contribution to Europe. If we are now, from the social sciences, were to pick up what has been said and discuss this vis-à-vis the future role of Europe, and in that I think we have an enormous role, and I don't see a problem with starting that debate now if we carry it out well.
In our 40-year history of EU membership, one of the most harmonious and mutually beneficial dimensions of our relationship with the EU has been higher education and research. It's actually a bit that has worked amazingly well pretty much all of the time. It's also a bit that is quite big. About 18% of the EU money coming into the UK is for research and development. Not all in universities, but a little bit shy of a fifth of EU money into this country is for research and development. It's quite big on that metric. It's also quite big in terms of the number of people involved. When you add up all of the relationships between all of the academics and all of the students, there's a lot of people in the game, and those people become a political force. Not by acting together, but actually just by existing and having those relationships. So, on that basis, I just wonder if it is in the interests of the Cabinet Office to have higher education and research at the top table in the negotiations, not only because of its intrinsic importance, but because of the help that it brings to the management of the negotiations. I would suggest that if we are to stand a chance of getting there, then first of all, we should put a pause on banging on about how important we are, because there will be a long queue of people outside the door of the Cabinet Office telling the Cabinet Office how important they are. Instead, I think we should think about how to give the Cabinet Office what they want. Our own intrinsic worth can be revealed later on and will no doubt contribute to the discussion. But my instinct is to hold that back and to concentrate on the short-term imperative of actually getting a voice at the negotiating table in the first place.